Enemy power-up detected.
This is Incoming Missile, a MechWarrior Online podcast. Greetings MechWarriors, this is Cozened Indigo and Captain Cat bringing you a bonus episode of the podcast. Once again, we are bringing you our reaction to and our thoughts on the recent Dev Update podcast with Russ on the NGNG channels. Now, if you haven't heard that podcast, we'd really encourage you to check that one out. You will find that on the No Guts No Galaxy Twitch or on their YouTube channels. The episode that we are doing today does assume that you have heard what Russ had to say about MechWarrior Online and the basic direction of the game. Now for this conversation, we are extremely lucky to be joined by BearClaw, who, if you don't know, is a pretty much a mainstay of the community. He is a Twitch streamer, a high-level comp player, and yeah, an all-round nice guy. He's got a really good understanding of, not only the mechanics of the game itself, but a real in-depth understanding of the community. And he's got some pretty astute opinions on the announcement that Russ made, so it was great to have him along. So between Beer and of course Captain Cat, who also has a fantastic understanding of the game and the stuff that surrounds it, we had a bloody good conversation, so I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed talking about it. And as always, before we start, a big thank you to our patrons, Dan N, Jondoeiowa, Jacob Sawyer, Shaky Snake, BrioS, Chilgapsan, and our good friends over at MWO Comp. Your support absolutely rocks, and if you did want to support us in more tangible ways, like these amazing mech warriors, you can become a patron for as little as $2 per month, so look for us on Patreon. Right, let's get into it.
Heat level critical.
Alright, welcome everyone. We won't give too much preamble into this one, as we highlighted in the intro. We are going to have a quick chat about the podcast that was released yesterday by NGNGtv, where Russ gave a bit of an update on the development of MWO. And of course we are lucky enough to be joined by none other than BearClaw. How are you, man?
Doing all right.
And of course my partner in crime, Captain Cat. How are you, dude?
Yeah, good.
Right, a couple of topics that we are going to bite off from yesterday, and let's talk firstly about, I guess, Russ and what he was like. He was pretty clear, pretty lucid, pretty honest. What did you guys think about that?
I just wish he had been like that more often, because so many times in the past, he's hyped things up, and then it's gotten filtered through, and it comes out something else, and we all get disappointed about that. Yeah. And I feel like this straightforward way is a more preferred way for everyone, even if it just makes a bunch of memes. I think it's worthwhile to have an honest and straightforward approach about how you develop things, how things are going. It's always a good thing.
Just a touch of resentment that it was Friday and he wasn't allowed to have a beer.
He was pretty good about it, I think. And I liked the honesty. I thought it was so much easier to accept and understand, even if you don't agree. And I think that's probably what you're getting to, BearClaw, that, people will always make memes, people will always disagree, but they will at least appreciate and respect that you've been honest about it. And I really liked the way that he went about it. It was forthright. He didn't shy away from some of the questions in chat. He kind of took them straight on, and I thought it was much better for that.
Must be quite a scary proposition for some of the people that work there to have him have free reign of a live mic, because he does tend to wander, I suspect, off the topic, off the show notes, and ramble into dangerous territory where he's just putting ideas out there that might be a bit scary for some.
Yeah, for Paul in particular, probably. All right, so other than Russ's communication, which I thought was pretty good, as one of the takeaways from that podcast, there was probably two general topics that I think were covered. It was probably a little bit less maybe than people expected, but they talked about faction play and their continued commitment to faction play. And then the second thing that they talked about generally was monetization of MechWarrior and its future. So specifically, they were talking about mech packs, and they were talking about changes to MechCon and the World Champs. So if we could start with faction play, Beckle, what do you think about the talk about faction play and Russ basically saying, we're going to get it to a state where it can be kind of the premier mode in the game?
Well, I like that idea that they're committed to this and they're committed to fixing it. I can appreciate that because I don't play much faction play, and it'd be nice to go in there and not see the same thing over and over again. These strange things that keep happening instead of these bland invasion matches. Maybe these fixes that they're throwing in will fix that, and maybe I'll go back to playing it and not being completely bored while I'm doing so. It's always a good thing.
He said it was one of the key things that I took out of the start of what he was said about it was that it was communicated very robustly in the forums. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I like the fact that they're having an open conversation with the community about what needs to be changed, but all of this ultimately comes down to is what are they going to do with all of this information? Because that's a big thing. It's not necessarily what we say, it's how they execute what we've done or what we've said and how they responded to it.
I think that they went in with some really good intentions to, give these weekly progress updates on the faction play and things. And of course, people are busy and it just didn't eventuate to be exactly every week. And what was there could be very sparse. And what was communicated was general, I guess you'd say. And then when it comes to the actual implementation of faction play, what was wrong with it was not general, it was specific. It was, not being able to see what the population of each faction was, for example. And that is not something that you can get out of just reading a little, 100 words progress update. We're not going to be able to see, they're going to do it that way. Damn, we better let them know that that's just not going to work at this time so that they can get in there and fix it. So I think it's not quite, it doesn't tell the whole story to say it was communicated really robustly in the forums, because what was communicated obviously wasn't, and perhaps couldn't be, but what was communicated wasn't what was delivered.
And that's the challenge, I guess. If your communication plan is to use the forum, you're automatically limited by that medium because only a certain number of people are going to go to the forums and do it. And as you say, Kat, maybe it doesn't come through what they're trying to say, let alone what people are trying to feed back. My question, Beer, you talked about really is the execution what it needs to be. Does Paul have, I guess, the vision of faction play? Does he have the strategic outlook in his head to make faction play what the players want?
I would almost say he needs to come to share that vision with the community. He's always been very afraid of, taking feedback and putting it in the game because he's uncertain and he's not confident that it'll be what he wants or what, his development team can do. And that's, I think, the core of this, lack of communication, or we'll just take what we can get from you guys and we might not take the whole thing. And that's kind of where these inconsistencies between what we say and how they do it and what they can do.
Yeah, it's almost like the community feedback and then Paul and the team have to interpret it and then produce something, and then the community feedback once the product's out there, and it's not particularly iterative, if you know what I mean, because sometimes they make a change and they've had to commit to a certain engineering or investment cost-wise and they can't roll it back. So this way of getting faction play to something that the players really want, it doesn't seem particularly iterative. It's just like, okay, we're going to try and understand what you want, then we're going to produce something, and then you can feed back, but we're going to be limited in the changes we can make.
My instinct is that a lot of these development projects that we've seen through the years, and some of them have come and gone, like they got put in the game and then withdrawn in things like that, or put in the game and then changed a lot through multiple patches. that they're kind of passion projects. Someone has an idea, like Paul has an idea of a thing that he wants to do, and they, do a bit of investigation. How much time is this going to cost us? Blah, 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 blah. And then they go through with it, and then the execution doesn't work. And that's when they sort of seem to kind of run out of ideas. Like they haven't got any plan B. They haven't really put the time in to decide whether it's definitely going to work. If the idea is what's the word that I want? Basically, if it's a viable product at the end, they've put in the work to decide how much development time it's going to do and how much it's going to cost and whether that's worth it and all that kind of stuff, I suspect. But I think they're somewhat lacking when it comes to actually predicting whether something's going to be working.
That makes sense. If you're going to run a successful project or implement something, then the period before you roll out is really important. Getting the opinions, making sure that the users have fed in, and that the product that you're going to produce is what the users want. And passion projects are a really good way to describe it, basically, because without a doubt they're passionate about the game, but maybe that passion blinds them a little bit, and some of the project management stuff falls over that. They don't, as you say, maybe have a strategic plan for change, or if they need to roll back. Those things maybe aren't factored in when they start on the journey, start on the passion project, and once it's built, then it becomes too late to go back and make those changes that they should have investigated to start with.
I've heard other studios talk about having a really draft versions of their ideas, and then they just sort of throw it in the ring for everyone to have a go at, where they, it doesn't matter if all the mechs are just cubes and it's, there's no map, but as long as you can get a sense of the change in action and everyone can have a go at it and just get a feel for whether it works roughly or not before they even start. This is, someone commits a couple of days to getting a very, very, very draft version of it out and give it a go. And I really feel like they don't do something like that. They don't fire it through to, play testing at a very early stage. It's, they do it, they finish it, they polish it, and then they put it in play testing. And maybe it's not there as they imagined it.
Do you think that's where the gap is, Bear? That the reason that maybe things aren't executed quite the way that the community would want is because maybe that their change process isn't maybe project managed well enough, that it does. It starts as a passion project. It's like someone trying to make a certain mech work with a bad build. It's just not going to work. You need to do a little bit more work in the mech lab to optimize it a little bit more. Do you think that maybe happens a little bit with these passion projects, as Kat calls them?
Yeah, definitely. Because, it goes from, as he said, they polish it, they finish it, and then they expose it to us. Why hasn't the community been, shown at least what's happening or what's going on, or, why isn't the community the internal testing part? Why aren't there more public test servers? These questions start to pop up when, they throw things in a patch and we see it for the first time and we're like, why is this here? The questions and all the frustration comes out because we've had no interaction with this thing that just pops up and now it's here and now we have to deal with it. And it's a funny thing.
I was going to say, I think PGI would say in this case, if they were here in the room, they would say that they did communicate it. We did communicate it. We did put up posts on the forums. We did do a couple of rounds of PTSs for this. I know I did actually have a go at the faction play PTS through much suffering to actually get a game. But I noticed some things that were missing or wrong or broken. But I thought that those things were, known to be missing or broken or wrong because it was a PTS and that they would be sort of fixed up. The reason that content wasn't there was because it was just a, rough draft. But then when it came around to it, actually, those things weren't in the release.
And I think that's the core problem. It's what point in the journey that they're getting the feedback, and they really need to get the feedback from the subject matter experts at a point before, so that they can, it can guide the design. They don't want to be getting feedback when you're past a certain point of no return, when there's certain things that you can't change. And I think that's what's missed a little bit, is that we get PTSs when it's 90% done, rather than getting PTSs when it's 10% done, and you're really trying to build your user cases. You know, you're trying to explore some things that you want faction play to be. And I guess to bring this full circle, that's kind of why I asked this question around, can Paul execute through this iterative process that Russ talked about yesterday, because is there the necessary approach to make it happen? And does he have the vision in his head? Can he communicate that to the players to say, this is where we want faction play to be, tell us how to get there? That's what seems to be missing for me, and that's why I worried a little bit with that announcement around faction play, to say, okay, well, you know, there's going to be at least 3 months more dev time to get it right. I mean, is 3 months enough? And, you know, even if 3 months was enough to do it, you know, is Paul's vision sufficient to get there in 3 months?
I feel like this is where Paul presents us with an idea, and he gives us he wants us to give feedback on that idea, and then if that idea doesn't work out, then he presents us with a new idea. Yeah. Notice that there's no, you know, drafting in, oh, maybe the community's right. It's always, okay, here's an idea, feedback. Here's an idea, feedback. Yeah. And that's the big reason that most of these things are just, you know, they pump something out, we're just like, okay, this is wrong, that's wrong, fix it. And then they come out, this is all wrong, what are you doing? It's the same story.
Such a fair comment, there's not a cycle to feedback, and there's no point giving feedback if there's not a cycle. You know, if you can't give feedback and then the person takes it on and then comes back and tells you what they've done about it, then there's no point giving the feedback in the first place, because you can't trust that anything's going to be done about it. So yeah, I mean, for me, that's probably my main worry about whether faction play will get to where it needs to be, because I like the idea that it's the premier game mode, and, you know, quick play is just something supplementary to that. I'm fine with that because I enjoy faction play, but 3 months doesn't seem enough time to get faction play to the point where, you know, everyone in the community, or most of the community, is going to want to embrace it and play it.
I mean, they're careful to say that the scope was very limited on what they could actually do. They're not when they say that they're going to put this more development time in, they're not really talking about adding a bunch more features or really any huge amounts of dev time beyond what I guess they've been using on the previous months. And Paul did post up, I don't know if you guys read through or skimmed through the you know, the post-release notes of step by step what they were going to do to fix it. And that was really good. And I think, you know, the unfortunate part about this conversation is it's all fair, and it's all, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but this particular case is one where they've actually gone above and beyond what they've done before to make a special effort to communicate what they were going to do, and done a much better job than previously. It's just still not good enough. That's the sad part. And yeah, so to come back to that, he has laid out kind of a roadmap of the features and stuff that he thinks absolutely needs to be done to get faction play sort of working, and when they're going to be done by, how much, you know, which ones will require patching and work, and which ones can be done straight away. Some of them have been done straight away, and faction play is much better off for those changes that have already been put on. You know, the short cycles, scouting, you don't have to play 3 weeks of scouting mode.
Oh.
So there is some positives there.
Definitely.
To that process.
Yeah, it's a good point, Captain Cat, and I guess it's not to say that what they haven't done thus far is appreciated, or what they have done thus far isn't going in the right direction. I guess the question more becomes, is 3 months enough time of what we would assume is not full-time dev work, given what we've seen? And yeah, we certainly appreciate how it's come, and that what they're doing at the moment is probably better than previous. But I mean, I haven't been around long enough to judge this, but how long have they been trying to get faction play right? And can we be confident, particularly given some of the other stuff that we're about to talk about with the future of the game, can we be confident that 3 months is enough time to get it where it needs to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty egregious on that. It seems like it's come down to the wire now. It's sort of, like what Kazan said, it's sort of, is it enough time now, or is it too little too late? Because faction play has been here for a while, and it's been in a nasty state for a long time, and I'm just curious that I wouldn't say curious, I would say I'm cautious to say that 3 months is enough time, because from what it seems, or what, I've seen as, playing this game for however long I was, does 3 months add up to anything in terms of development time? Will we see a change?
I think you need to set your sights nice and low, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I really think
that is true. That is true.
I think that 3 months, from reading those notes that Paul put out already, that 3 months pretty much covers what he has talked about already. And then there'll be a few more bits and pieces thrown in on top of that. So 3 months is going to get us his vision at the outset, kind of, workable, playable, and finished, so to speak. It's not, I don't think they're saying that they're going to get us anything really much beyond that at all. It's going to be what they've talked about, and with his, himself and his 3 staff or whatever he's got left, to work on this, just chipping away at it and releasing little patches to, get us the population of each faction before you choose which faction you're going to go, for example. That's something that's going to, he said is going to require dev time, and they're going to have to, make a little UI for it, that sort of thing. So next month we might get that. And then the month after that, we'll get some other small feature. I don't think it's going to be transformative. It's not going to be a whole new world, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair points, Captain. I think you've made some pretty good points in there. And yeah, personally, I guess I'm hopeful. Maybe my expectations are low, but I do have kind of skeptical hippo eyes at some of this stuff. And yeah, I will hope, and let's hope faction play can carry the game forward. Right, let's move on to probably what is the bigger topic to come out of the podcast yesterday. And I summed that up by saying that it was around monetization. Specifically, there was 2 things that Russ covered and talked about, both relating to monetization. The first one was the mech pack cycle, and then the second one was changes to MechCon and the World Champs. And some of the things that they talked about changing are both in an effort to influence their monetization, and that was probably the point that was most telling, I guess, was maybe the honesty and how forthright Russ was about MechWarrior Online and where it was positioned from a monetization point of view. Personally, I found that really refreshing. I enjoyed his honesty around that, but it certainly threw up some questions. We can talk about that in general, but let's firstly talk about the mech packs and what you guys think about that. In short, we have had effectively a monthly mech pack cycle and a whole lot of dev time and investment to make sure that a new mech is released every month. They're going to stop that, and we're going to get mech releases, but they're going to be periodic with no set schedule. So what were your thoughts on that, guys?
I feel like it's a good step, because as time goes on, I think Russ mentioned this, they haven't seen a lot of profit from it, is because it's been coming out right every month. Even Darren mentioned this, that it's a bit of catch up every time a new mech comes out, that, I got to skill this now, I got to spend the time to grind all this stuff out, and it's a game of catch up. And I feel like that was the big drawback to monthly mech packs, is that there's content, but we have to grind with this content. We're just adding more and more time to this already arduous process of grinding mechs, dealing with the skill tree, and all of this other stuff that comes along with it. Yeah, it's cool, but it presents a bunch of work we have to do before we see the end result of a fully skilled mech or a build that works. And that's where things get interesting, is that I hope as they slow the mech packs down, maybe people will come to realize, this mech looks good, or this mech seems interesting, or they're paying attention and they're listening to us. We want this mech, and they're giving us this mech, and stuff like that. And that's a really big deal, is slowing the content down as not to spam somebody to death with mechs and fill their mech bays up. And then suddenly I have 20 unskilled mechs I don't want to play because the new mech is out.
Yeah, such a good point, that quantity has a quality all of its own. And if they were just stuck in this pell-mell race, development race, every month, and if every month was crunch for them to get the new one out, you would think that if they ease up on that, then you get better quality and more thought-through releases, so that when they do hit, they're that much more impactful. I mean, Captain Cat?
I mean, yeah, it is pretty relentless, isn't it? And you can almost gauge how good a mech is, the monthly mech is, on my useless stats. Because there's some that I have, I'm trying to level those 7 or 8 mechs, and it's really tanking my scores that month to do that. And I think that where it really becomes a bit of a grind is when the mechs start feeling very similar. Like, it's like, oh, this is another mech with a couple of missile hardpoints and some laser hardpoints. What am I going to do with this piece of, junk?
Yeah. Then the question starts to come out that, why am I buying these mech packs if it's all the same? That's also a big deal when it comes to quantity.
Yeah, absolutely. You called that the incubus effect, Captain Cat, where it was really hard to tell the variants apart from each other. They just washed in. I mean, can I say, and these are my thoughts, but I just want to see whether it's the same for you guys. I thought this was actually a good thing. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that nothing good came out of this update. I actually think this is a positive thing, that they've reduced the this pell-mell race to get mechs out every month. I think it will lead to more development time, and maybe the spin-off is that it helps faction play, like we're just talking about, gives them more devs on hand. But just generally speaking, it will make things a little bit more meaningful, both in the mechs that get released, so that they are a little bit more distinctive and you've got more time to enjoy them. But obviously the other side to it is that for the company, maybe it's a vital saving in money, because the return on investment just isn't there for that monthly release. Did you guys take it as a positive ultimately?
Yeah, I thought it was a good thing because, as I've said before, like, people are getting just spammed with mechs that are similar, or the questions pop up that, oh, what's the point of buying this? I already have this. It seems no different, and I feel like this will make things a little more interesting in terms of what they get back and what we get as players from them. Is that the content may become better because there's more time with it. They have time to work out all of the funky hitboxes before they throw something at us. And we don't have the conversation of, oh my goodness, the Hellbringer's out and it's all CT, or the Sunspider's out and it's all CT.
Yeah.
They use the words like selective and sparing crowd favorites. I think that hopefully is what we get in the long run, because I agree with you. It's kind of relentless. And like you say, I really enjoyed the honesty. We kind of touched upon it, but the honesty saying that it's been about a year since those mech packs were profitable. And reading between the lines, you'd say that some of those mechs were profitable and some of them weren't. And then overall, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Hopefully they've been ticking over with them, but generally speaking, it's not really worth the time by the sound of it. I did think it was a bit of a PR spin to talk about, hey, this is a good thing, guys. We're not going to get mech packs anymore. But on the other hand, I don't. The death of MWO that everyone's. It seems like everyone's yelling, "Game's dead." I mean, how many times have we heard that now? Like, honestly, how many times? The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. But I don't see that as a game killer. I mean, if you think that, if you want to believe that's the, what's the word? The death knell.
Yeah.
If you want to believe that's the death knell for MechWarrior Online, well, go ahead. But in actual fact, nothing's really changed following this update.
It's probably the opposite. It's probably a sign of trying to increase survivability by not investing so much in that area.
They're elongating the releases. People will stick around a little longer for maybe the Stone Rhino's coming out, or the Bane is coming out. Those really fancy mechs people have always fantasized about playing in this game. maybe those become a reality.
Exactly, and more people want to buy them as well because, there's not, Hey, I want to circle back to that question about whether the end is nigh, Captain Cat, but let's just talk also about the other main tactic that they're going to look at for monetization. And it was twofold, but really what it came down to was about the world champs no longer being on site. And, Russ talked about the kind of extra $100,000 plus that's involved in getting the teams there and facilitating that on-site competition. What did you guys think about that? For me personally, I tended to think that was actually not a bad thing because it is quite an investment of money. But how did you guys feel about the choice to go from a on-site world champs to, I guess Russ alluded to this player run world champs?
Well, I feel like it's a good and bad thing. Well, I'll start with the good. The good thing is that, people from Europe, European players, AP players, you guys don't have to go all the way to Vancouver, with no sleep and try and fight people that...
Hey, I'll go to Vancouver.
Yeah. But trying to fight people from NA that have, had rest, they're used to this time zone and stuff like that. Because that's a really big deal in competition. You play tired, you play sloppy. And that's a really big deal in competitive scenes, not just here, but everywhere, really. And also, I hope that the cost of all of the transportation and whatnot is redistributed back into the prize pool. So maybe we get a bigger prize pool this year. Who knows?
Great point.
The bad thing is that, well, it's not really a bad thing, but it's a drawback, is that, you can't meet these competitive players in person, these people you've played with, the competitive players we all know, the streamers and whatnot. That may not happen, but I think economically and physically, I think it's worth it more than just having people to meet there.
Yeah, I was the same. I agree with you. There would be some really good points, particularly around that redistribution. I guess my question is, and the bad point that you talked about maybe not the same vibe or the chance for the community to get together and socialise. Would we see, though, a better World Champs if it's player run? And are we going to see a better comp scene in general if we maybe just have PGI facilitating some of the technical infrastructure and you're freeing it up to, you're outsourcing to the players to run the format, maybe the bulk of the marketing and all that kind of stuff? Do you think that's better overall, or is taking World Champs away from MetCon? Is PGI saying we don't care as much about comp?
Better than stock mode?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think so.
Way better. But I feel like it's a sign of things to come. As like, okay, well, our comp scene, the things we wanted didn't go so well, so we're gonna give it back to you, and you run it this time. And I hope that brings back a lot of the old people that have disappeared from MRBC, like what's name, Bandit, MDM. Hopefully we see them come back and try and bring that MRBC stuff back, because that's what people wanted and they missed out last year. And now maybe this is the time to come back and say, yeah, this is coming back. Come back and play for us, please.
Yeah, I am hopeful that they just give the player run groups, and let's say MRBC is one. I happen to think MWO Comp are doing an outstanding job thus far, so they're probably another group that if they're not going to be involved, they should. If they're given the freedom and the support from PGI, I think you will get a better product than if PGI were just running it off their own backs, because you get people not only with the subject matter expertise, but with the passion, the knowledge, the time to make it successful. But it just, hopefully PGI give them enough leash and the support that they need, whether that be through giveaways or redistribution or whatever, marketing in particular. I hope that's there, because we talked about it in a recent podcast, Cat and Cat, around competition is a gem that PGI could invest in to help promote the game in general, and I don't think it would actually take a lot from them. They would only need to invest a small amount, to really help the comp scene elevate. So yeah, my worry is that it is a good decision to outsource it, but they've also got to provide that necessary support to those player-run competitions. If they're making suggestions, for example, for dev changes that are worth the investment, to UIs or formats, or, if the player run comp say comp needs to be conquest, faction play conquest, and we need a comp like that, that's a possibility. So yeah, sorry, Cat, I was stealing your ideas.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, if that idea gets out there and gets used, I'd love that. But I see what you're saying is that, there's a few options in the lobby of to game modes and things that you can have, but we're still missing a few. I think faction play conquest would be a really interesting format for competitive play, for example. But you can't currently run a lobby with that rule set. And I think coming back to what you were saying, like a good compromise between not having, not flying all the players over to Vancouver and all that kind of thing, and yet supporting a world championship would be to put it on the screen. Just phone it in, like have everybody, play their finals while MetCon's going, and just beam it in. And shoutcast it, all that kind of stuff. It would cost you a hell of a lot less because you wouldn't have to fly everyone there. You wouldn't need all the computers. You wouldn't need all the blah referees and all that junk. But it would still show that you do care about the World Championship, and it is supported by PGI, and it is a part of what makes MetCon good. That the highest level of play in MechWarrior is being shown on the screen, and you can shout at the screen and shout for your favorite team and all that stuff.
Spam chat.
Yeah, spam chat.
Slow mode.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly, Kat, there in a couple of words, in that you said that you hoped PGI still care, and that's what I want. I enjoy comp, even though I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy taking part of it, and I just hope that PGI still care, and that they still provide the support through publicising, supporting the thing, and they do it to a degree now. Don't get me wrong, but if they were to hand World Champs over to MRBC or MWO Comp or a combination of those guys, that they also support it by asking Sean Lang to put a team in, asking Key Street, really, really promoting it and saying to, hey, Beer, we know that you're already part of a comp team, but hey, could you start up a comp team, with some of your viewers, or, just engage in these other strategies that is going to promote comp?
That'd be a really good idea.
It's hard. I think it would be hard. It's hard for PGI to assess the value of comp, and especially potentially to assess the value of it at MetCon.
Yeah,
because it's not where they get their paycheck. The people just buying mech packs and things and buying colors and stuff is what gives them money, and that's only tangentially related to competitive mode. And I think a lot of the positives that you can see, Cozen, are intangibles.
Yeah, and it is hard to quantify those intangibles to say that it's worth the investment, but I guess probably I agree with you, and my only counter would be it wouldn't actually require a lot of investment for those intangibles. It's probably stuff that they already do a good job, I think, in supporting streamers and content creators, but they just kind of need to also make that comp specific. But yeah, it's MetCon, and that entire thing is basically publicity. It's not a money maker for them. So yeah, it's just asking that question to say that, are we going to spend some pub money, some publicity money in comp? And yeah, personally, I think it would be worth it, because I don't think it would cost much. But yeah, you're right. It's just whether the intangibles there are able to generate some return on investment for them.
What I'm really saying is, I hope that they know that it's worth it. Like, I hope that they have actually assessed those intangibles and gone, well, actually, this is not just a thorn in our side. This comp scene thing. It's not just like an extra thing that we have to do, like an irritating job. It's actually worth our time to support this stuff. And I mean, it's been alluded to, but they do support the comps with all the rewards and things that you get for the player run competitions, and that is not insignificant amount of game content, MC, and things like hundreds of thousands of MC being distributed out. It's equivalent to a lot of real money. So there is that.
It's not so much that, and I'm PGI great in that support. It's just the publicity, getting the hype behind it. I think it's a scene we want to grow, and the prizes are great, but I don't necessarily know if they're good methods for growth in the scene. Whereas by publicising and marketing the comp scene and those players and stuff is the best chance for, and having a healthy esport is the best chance to kind of grow into new markets and get more people playing. So that would be great. And, outsourcing it to a player-run comp is a good step. I think that's really, really good. And yeah, hopefully that it's not a sign that they just don't care as much about comp. Right, so we've covered off those two specific points, but both of those were brought up really in the context of monetization. And I guess that's something that I'm keen, particularly for yourself, Bear, to get your feedback on. And let's start off with that topic that Kat talked about before. Monetization is about saving costs. Russ stated unequivocally that MechWarrior Online is not necessarily self-sufficient, that it is potentially already or will have to run off the tails of the success of Mercenaries. And I think that probably got a lot of alarm bells ringing for people. They were worried about the fact that if it's not self-sufficient, is it going to be on the chopping block? If not now, then when? Is what we heard yesterday a sign that they're going to start to phase out MechWarrior because the money's not in it?
I would almost say yes, but I would almost say no, because things are, they're trying to slow down that process of, death, basically, by, sparingly separating the mech packs. You notice things are getting a little more elongated in terms of money. And I feel like it's just a step to compensate for maybe a mech pack here, we get something instead, or, the idea of a subscription would come into play is that where one mech pack isn't, or two mech packs aren't, there's, this monthly piece of something coming in to sort of egg on the process to the end, I guess. That would be a good way to put it. But if a subscription were to happen, it would cause a lot of change to happen in game, especially on the monetary side of things we see in game, like mech bays, new mechs coming out, like the entire concept of MC would have to disappear in order for subscriptions to work. And that's a really big deal because, people panicked as soon as he said subscription. Everyone went, read! It was amazing.
Yeah.
I think that was an example of Russ speaking out of turn. I think that was an example of Russ going off script to just be like, we could do some idea, and then just throwing out an idea which is not at all cooked. It hasn't had any time of consideration really. And because Bombadil was quite quick to be like, oh, just remember guys, he's not talking about what we're going to do. It's just
a
blah,
thought,
blah, blah.
But that thought
but everybody was like,
I mean, it does pose the question, and I guess probably what you're getting at there, Bear Claw, is that some changes to the monetization strategy may mean some significant changes in game. I mean, was that your read as well, Captain Cat? And if you don't think it's going to be subscription, what do you think might happen, and what kind of time frame might we look at?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of content in the game already. So the things that have been developed and put in the game already are possibly enough to keep MechWarrior ticking over for a long, long time in terms of, colors, camos, bolt-ons, premium mechs that are already in the game. I mean, IV4s must be a real money spinner for them, and Sleipnirs, things like that, Viragos. that'll keep the game, that'll keep the servers on for a while. And then beyond that, I think that they are a small studio. A lot of this conversation really comes down to whether you believe what was said or not, whether you think that they were being disingenuous or not. And I tend to believe what they said. I mean, I think that it was couched inside a bit of PR spin and sort of how are we going to present this information in a way that's not going to make people freak out. But I do think that they were, I did find their honesty refreshing. I did believe it was honest. So I think as a small studio, they are really genuinely not sure what's going to happen after September when MechWarrior 5 comes out. Is it going to be, if it's successful, then the studio will be successful. If it's not, that could be it. And that the going forward, the life of MechWarrior Online is really, I believe, dependent on the success of that title.
Bear, do you think the community maybe overreads this stuff? I mean, Captain Cat was saying that he tended to believe what PGI said. Is there a bit of PTSD where the community overreads these things because they feel as though they've been dishonest in the past or disingenuous? Are these calls that the death knell has sounded because of that? The community are just worried?
I always feel like when this question comes up, or when concerns like this happen, it's always a double-edged sword, because on one side you have people, as soon as Russ says anything related to what they're thinking, it's over. The bells and whistles are off. Everybody's running for the hills. And then you've got the other side of that is like, okay, I'm cool with this. I fully support this. And there's a lot of missing middle ground of where people are like, okay, I can sift through all the minutia of this, all this stuff going around what they're saying, and I can take this with a grain of salt and say, okay, they don't know what they're doing, but I'm here and I can respect that they're talking to us. They're giving us information about what the situation is. Yeah. And I think that part of, where the two fields end is that's the critical thing that this community is kind of lacking.
I think it's very amusing that it's the same people who have advocated for a long time not to buy mech packs that are freaking out about the death of mech packs.
The same people over and over.
We'll teach PGI, just stop buying mech packs. Oh my god, they're not selling mech packs.
And it's a really good point, Bear, that, particularly we do tend to hear from the extremes, either the preppers that think that the end is always nigh, and they read any sign as something that they should run into their bunkers about. And then, particularly at the other end, there's more the shills, or the people that will always think that it's going to be fine, even till the day that it falls on their head. But the reality is most people are in the middle. They can sift through and they can understand that, PGI maybe need to weigh up the options. I think that there are a lot of options to keep the game alive moving forward. I mean, what they've done and what they announced yesterday were two methods to help them save money, and that may be huge money savers for them. It might be that just by reducing that cycle and by not paying for the on-site world champs, that might go most of the way to helping MechWarrior be sustainable for years. So, yesterday's probably a good sign that those are the type of choices that they're making, and they're actually both probably pretty positive.
Definitely. I feel like the subscription idea was just maybe Russ should have mentioned, and maybe if the other two options don't work out, as a last resort, we'll switch to subscription.
Yeah,
that would have gone a little better.
I find subscription a bit more palatable, to be fair. If you were to pay, depending on the cost, of course, but if you were paying, $5 or $10 a month, and you're not having to pay for mech packs or something like that, or MC, then it might work out. But I didn't think it was too kind of an online service, or game as a live service, which is kind of the new model.
Really depends on what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you predict the death of MechWarrior online for long enough, eventually you're going to be right. So,
yep.
And it's been years now, and it's actually doing pretty well. Month to month, it's pretty stable. Because the people that are here still enjoy the game, or at least are in some sort of Stockholm syndrome and keep playing.
Yeah. Or a bad relationship they can't get out of. I hear that a lot.
There's nothing to just migrate to. That's a big part.
The difficulty.
Yeah.
That scratches an itch that there's not another game you can just go and tinker with the mech in the mech lab and then go and use it to shoot people in the face. There isn't something like that.
I mean, that's key context, Captain Cat. It's a really good point in the fact that we don't necessarily consider that context, that it has a niche, that it is pretty well supported, and even though it might not be completely self-sufficient, it may not be far off, and it may not need that much life support to stay on, at least in its current form. So, the changes that need to be made around monetization may not need to be huge, and it's not going to suddenly catapult it into one of these predatory mobile free-to-play type models You talked about Anthem, and there's a ton at the moment that anything by EA, we're not going to end up with something like that.
I did find it pretty cringy how the really obvious kind of, please go and buy a mech pack, guys. Maybe now's a good time to go mech pack, and the please buy MechWarrior 5, guys, because game's dead otherwise. Kind of, I that did make me feel uncomfortable. It did make me feel like I was being manipulated, or that could be maybe have been put better or even left unsaid.
Yeah, it felt like a sob story at that point.
Yeah, it's an interesting subtext. I didn't get that as much. I mean, expand on that a little bit more, Captain Kid. I mean, what, why do you think it was just maybe not a good communication method, or were they trying to drum up sales, or?
Like I said, it just felt cringy to me to be like, well, maybe now's a good time to go buy a mech pack, guys. It was, it didn't come off well, and I could already hear the screeching off in the distance.
Yeah.
About being asked to do that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it was smart in that. I don't think it would be a particularly successful move. I don't think anyone's going to go out and buy a mech pack because you asked them to.
Yeah. So that kind of jokes not joking type approach was maybe a little bit out of place. As I said, I didn't pick it up as much, but maybe it was just a way of trying to soften or make the other stuff that they were saying a little bit more palatable. Maybe generally their message was, hey, continue to support the game. We want you to continue to support it, but it just came off, maybe a little bit cringeworthy, as you were saying, Kim. Did you pick it up, Beer? I mean, did you pick that up as well? Did you find that it was a little bit kind of, buy a mech pack, jokes, not jokes?
Yeah, it was sort of like tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. It was maybe he was making a joke or trying to really influence us. I wouldn't know, because I've kind of detached myself from that idea of, oh yeah, whatever Russ says, I'll do. Like I'm past that. I'm a little smarter about things now. Is that when people say things, I tend to look around before I start jumping into things.
Yeah, that's a good method for anything. Otherwise, you just kind of end up listening to people that have already got your own opinion. So you don't. It's hard to kind of see both sides to it.
Yeah, it's sort of a method of control. Indirect.
All right, so I mean that's a little bit about the monetization and whether we think the end is near. I don't think it is, and I get the impression that you guys don't think it is either. So if MechWarrior Online does continue, what do you think these changes might mean for the game? A year from now, if we're looking back on this conversation, do you think that it's going to just putter along and there's only going to be small changes, or is it just going to plateau? Or do you think that by peering back on some of the stuff like the mech packs, we might get better quality stuff either in the new mech pack releases, or faction play gets better? Does it free up time for them to do a better job at the game right now?
I would almost say that we might not get much until MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries is out, because once that's released, it's kind of a weight off their shoulders. They can sort of return to this game and clear off a few more things that needed to be finalized and sort of let it sit for now. It really depends on how Mech 5 does, dependent on if they come back or if they stay with Mech 5, is because like Russ said, it's riding on the coattails now. So the issue becomes if what's keeping up the coattails fails, then we're stuck. We're dead in the water. Nothing can be done. But I feel like when they get Mech 5 out of the door and they get this weight off their shoulders, I think they can come back and revisit some little details that they missed out, first time through, or maybe we get that engine upgrade. I don't know, but yeah, hopefully near September we get a better picture of where MechWarrior Online sits in terms of that.
I mean, there's a ton of changes that you could make to existing mechs, like quirks and all that kind of stuff to make them, more purchasable and all of those kind of things. Kanajoshi, I see in chat, suggested that you could make up new versions of mech packs where you sell existing mechs, as a foursome or something like the dropship deals, and that could require just a tiny bit of input dev-wise. Captain Cat, I mean, What do you think future-wise? What might we see with this new monetization strategy?
Yeah, and so when was the original dev stream announcement supposed to be with in relation to the patch? It was going to be the same week originally, right?
Yeah, it was the 24th of May.
Because I think that timing would have been much better. I think that this chat would have been much more palatable if they had been able to say, look, here's the patch notes for this week, and we're gonna put MechWarrior into maintenance mode, if you want to call it that, and here's the mech pack that's coming out next month. So people could have a feel that what they were saying in terms of slowing things down, we've had 1 or 2 months without a mech pack. We're kind of due a mech pack, maybe you could say, based on what they've told us. It would have given people a bit more confidence in what they were saying, I think, to be told, look, we're going to release mech packs now and then. Here's the next one. It's probably going to be a couple of months until we do another one. Here's the patch notes. My instinct is that the patches will continue fairly similar to what we've seen so far this year. Sort of small changes, whether they'll be monthly patches or not, I'm not sure, but I think that they will continue doing them. I hope they will continue with the mech packs now and then, just to flavor it up. I think something that's really important for a game of MechWarrior Online is to shake the meta up now and then with some, weapons value changes. I don't think that there's a right answer to weapon balancing. I think that what makes it interesting is having sort of sweeping changes come through now and then that make you reassess your mech lab and think, well, what's good now? And I think that's crucial to the success of MechWarrior Online going forward, is to have those shake-ups now and then. And if we stop getting those, then the gameplay is going to get really stale. And those mechs that are good now are going to be good forever.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Beer. I think everything will depend on the success of Mercenaries. And I think that they're pretty much holding off making any major decisions until they see how that goes. I mean, if they hit that 1 million unit mark, which it sounded like that was a goal for Russ, depending, based on previous sales of MechWarrior games, then yeah, it may mean that they have a better idea of kind of what magnitude of support that they can give MechWarrior, and yeah, it may mean that it's lean change-wise for a little bit, but if Mercenaries are successful, then they can maybe sit down and invest some more time in MechWarrior Online, and and then there's probably lots of methods that they could use to, as you were saying, Kat, to shake up the meta, to keep things fresh, to keep people playing. Hopefully the events keep rolling out. I mean, it's. Do you think that'll still be a big part of it?
Oh, definitely. And I noticed that the events, they, like the first one, I think it was by Matt Newman, where he had a little apology, sorry for the bad things.
Yeah.
Where they were influencing playstyle, right? And I harped on this for a little while because, suddenly the matchmaker breaks when the event pops up. Oh, 100 MC for LRM damage. You see a ton of LRM. That just drives me nuts. And I'm not the only one about that. But another event rolls along and it's just get enough damage, match score, kills, assists, and that kind of thing. I hope that continues, because when they try and do this mech-based stuff, it becomes an issue of, oh no, Lermageddon 2.0 for a week, and it's just it's very frustrating when that happens.
I was saying to Captain Cat the other day, because he was just giving some thoughts on the Rifleman. I was just saying it's hard to judge at this point because so many people are running Rifleman because they've just been released and there's an event. So, even a mech pack suddenly collapses the matchmaker as well, because you've got, 10 Riflemans in a group. So, yeah.
These Riflemans are no good against other Riflemans. Yeah. And to come back to what you were saying, Bear, as well, it doesn't take much to make a Lermageddon. I mean, sure, the missile damage one makes the Lermageddon, but then any kind of match score one makes Lemmigeddon as well, because it's the easiest way for people to go out and farm a bunch of match scorers. I'm not good. I'll just we'll just throw out a bunch of LRMs and I'll get the match score. No worries.
All right, so I think we're probably all confident that there's lots of ways that they can still keep the game fresh without the kind of injection of constant content via the mech packs, and even taking the world champs away from on site at MetCon may end up being a real positive. Hopefully, not only for the world champs. Hopefully, we see a format that's really thought through and considered, but maybe a increase in the popularity of comp as well. That would be a great offshoot by outsourcing it to the players. So overall, guys, what were your thoughts? Just to finish up, were you happy with what you heard yesterday? What impressions are you left with after that update?
I was pleasantly surprised. For a very long time, I've been constantly criticizing and disappointed in this game, but this was a bit of a refresher, to hear the straightforward honesty about it, about the situation, to be informed about what's happening, ideas. I thought that was really cool what they did. Now the question is, what's going to happen? They've said things. Now let's see what their actions are. And that's where I dictate whether it was good or bad is dependent on the end result. And I think Russ mentioned this at the end of the podcast when they were saying their goodbyes, was like, I can't convince you, but I hope you stick around to see its good fruits or whatever. I don't know. Sorry, tangent, but yeah.
That's a really good point. Actions speak louder than words, and you're exactly right. Russ said the only thing we can do is make a good game that you enjoy. It doesn't matter what we say. Captain, your thoughts?
I think it was. I agree with Becklaw that it was refreshing. On the other hand, I was sad to hear, that things are going to change. I'm worried too, because we don't know what that means. Like, it's not explicit yet. How often these infrequent mech packs are going to come out. Like we just were talking about, what those patches are going to contain, how much content we're going to get each month in the form of patching, what the changes and updates to faction play, how far-reaching they'll be, or whether it'll just be sort of finessing what's already there. There's just a lot of uncertainty, I guess, and I am a little bit dejected and nervous about that, if I'm being honest, beyond the honesty and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think both of those viewpoints are valid. I tend to be a little bit of each, to be honest, not to sit on the fence, but I certainly understand yours, Captain Cap, and it feeds into what you were saying, Bearclaw, that this could be an announcement that does mean that things aren't going to get better. But if it is an announcement that means that they're going to pay attention to places that need to be, and that they are going to follow through these things, we actually may end up with a better product, even though they're taking some stuff away. But by the same token, Captain Kit, if there's any apathy or inattention to stuff, if they don't quite hit the mark, say with faction play or some of these other things, if patches continue to ignore crucial parts of the game that need to be changed, we could be starting to wind down with player population and stuff like that. So yeah, it could be a major positive or it could be a negative, and I think it'll come down to exactly what you said, Bear, about what kind of follow through we get and what kind of actions we see based on these changes. And
also, I think the other aspect of this is how the community will react, and what we'll see in the coming days and weeks. I think we're going to have a few more public exits of the game. I mean, Beef's already said that was his last MechWarrior Online stream.
Yeah. He always comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a bit more like that, and that'll shake people up as well to see that happen. And people, we've seen it. It's almost like a meme now. We've seen it so many times that people being like, "I'm out, fuck you all, I'm out," and then
come right back.
And then what's that?
Come right back afterward.
Well, and then that influences other people in the game because they are influencers, to use that horrible word. They are, community leaders, and people think that must be what everybody's doing. Yeah. Everybody's jumping ship. I guess I'll hang my helmet up too.
Yeah, it's often the case that people think the loudest opinions are the ones that are most commonly held, which is not always the case. To be fair, though, that's probably one thing that PGI could do, is they could try and get ahead of it to some degree and at least communicate some reassurances, or have key people or key influencers giving some positive messages to counteract that. I mean, Beef, I enjoy Beef's stream, but he does cater to a certain segment of the community, probably a generally more salty segment of the community. So, he's probably influencing a portion of the community that would already be cynical about it. So, yeah, it'll be interesting, but it is a good point, Kat, to see, what we see out in the community. And it's certainly something that PGI should, be trying to get ahead of and manage the pub.
I think we can take a little bit of heart in the healthiness of comp to bring it around in a little bit of a circle. That we've had, 2-player run comps in the last couple of months, MOR and then ISC, with like 32 teams, which is up from previous competitions. And it as long as comp stays healthy, then I think that's a really good bellwether or mind canary to the health of the game. That there's people who still care, there's people who still want to play and try hard and all those kind of things. That the game's going to stay alive as long as that's true.
All right, Beer, was there anything that you wanted to finish up with before we signed off?
No, that was it.
Awesome. Well, hey man, it was so good to talk to you today to get your opinion on all of this. Obviously, you've got a really, really good take on the game in general, and certainly what we saw yesterday. So thanks for listening, guys. Please be sure to tell us what you think. Leave some comments in the comments field below. Flick us an email, or of course, tune into Beer Claw's streams and talk to him about how you are thinking about those changes. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.
Bye, Make Pack.